The reviewer is working through a pull request with 40 files in it, one file at a time, exactly the way it was built to. At file 6, it reads a database migration that drops a column. At file 31, it reads code that still writes to that column. That's the bug. By then, the migration sits 25 files back, faded in its attention, so it never connects the two. It posts a clean verdict, Nadia emerges, and the right path breaks in production that night. Freeze it right there, because this moment, one reader thinning out over 40 files is what the exam asks about. The question is simple to say. What structure reviews all 40 files at full depth without attention fading at the end? That question comes from the biggest domain on the exam, Agentic Architecture and Orchestration, roughly 16 of the 60 questions you'll sit. It owns two task statements in full, the coordinator and subagent pattern, and how a subagent is invoked and handed context, plus half of a third, deciding which tools each agent is allowed to hold. By the end, you'll know when one loop should become a team and exactly what has to travel in the handover. The architect question parked in the corner all episode is the first of the four. Where does the work run? Start with why the loop failed, because the reason picks the fix. The reviewer didn't lack information. Every file was right there in front of it. What ran out was attention, because the more it read, the less firmly it held what it had already read. The guide calls that attention dilution, and its answer is to split one big read into smaller ones that each stay sharp. The structure the exam wants you to reach for is called hub and spoke, one coordinator in the middle, specialist around it. Notice what the drawing doesn't have. There is no line from one specialist to another. The coordinator does four jobs. It breaks the work up, hands out the pieces, collects what comes back, and decides what it all means. Routing every message through the middle sounds bureaucratic, but the middle is the only place you can watch the whole system from. If two specialists talk directly, that conversation would happen off the record, with no single place for a failure to get caught. One more thing about the coordinator, it's allowed to skip people. It reads each request and invokes only who's needed, so a one-line typo fix never wakes the migration specialist. And an option that always runs the full pipeline is usually your distractor. So the reviewer grows three specialists. One reads security, one reads migrations, one reads API contracts, and nothing else. On paper, that team is the fix, but nothing runs until the coordinator can actually launch a specialist, so wiring comes next. Launching a subagent is just a tool call, and that tool has to be on the coordinator's own allowed list, or nothing spawns at all. The guide calls that tool task, and right here is the naming trap that catches careful people. Current releases call the same tool agent, but task never fully left. It still appears in the startup tool list and in a denied permission record. So both strings are live at once, and anything you build to watch subagent activity has to match both. On the exam, rate the option in front of you, and if the stem writes task, then task is the tool it means. Each specialist is a definition you write once, answering three questions. When should I be used? What are my instructions? Which tools do I hold? A definition can also pin a specialist to a cheaper model or cap the turns it gets. So Nadia wires all of that up and reruns the 40 file pull request, and the migration specialist comes back vague again. Here is what just cost Nadia her evening, and it cost real candidates marks. A subagent inherits nothing from the conversation that spawned it. Sit with what nothing includes, because it's more than it sounds. It doesn't see the coordinator's conversation, and it doesn't see the reasoning the coordinator did a minute before the spawn. It doesn't even see what its own previous run found. Its context window starts fresh, and exactly one thing crosses from parent to child, the prompt string inside that tool call. That's the whole channel, one string. Now replay the vague specialist with that rule in your head. The coordinator had already read that migration at file 6, and it understood the problem completely. Then it spawned the specialist and said, check the migrations in this pull request. The specialist opened its eyes on an empty desk. No diff, no file list, no idea which column anyone was worried about. So it spent its turns rediscovering what the coordinator already knew and came back vague. Nothing in the system was broken. The handover was just empty. The fix isn't a smarter specialist. The fix is the coordinator handing over what it knows inside that one string. The file paths go in, the error text goes in, and so does the decision the coordinator already reached. It all goes in structured content in one place and sources in another, because attribution doesn't survive the crossing on its own. If a fact isn't in the prompt, then on the far side of that boundary, the fact does not exist. So say the rule the way you'll use it on exam day. Subagents inherit nothing, so the prompt is the handover. Whenever a question shows a subagent behaving stupidly, reach for that line first. The specialist can finally see the next decision is what it's allowed to touch, and here the trap is generosity. The instinct is to hand every specialist every tool just in case, and the guide is blunt about why that backfires. An agent holding 18 tools where 4 or 5 would do picks less reliably because every extra tool is one more way to choose wrong. And it gets worse than unreliable because an agent holding a tool outside its specialty tends to use it badly. Give the security specialist a file editing tool, and one day it quietly fixes the thing it was supposed to report. So each specialist gets the tools its role needs and nothing else. Security gets raid and search. Migrations adds one schema lookup. Contracts gets raid and diff. Then there is one exception and you make it on purpose. When a specialist keeps needing one small thing from another's territory, it gets one narrow tool for exactly that and nothing more. Hold on to that shape, the scope cross-roll tool. It decides this episode's question. Forcing which specific tool gets called sits here too, but it belongs with tool design, so it has its own episode. The team can see and it can touch. 2 mechanics left, and then Nadia's system is whole. First, a subagent never reports to you. It returns one final message to the coordinator, which decides what it's worth. So when 3 verdicts arrive, merging them is real work that the coordinator owns, not plumbing. Second, parallelism has one precise mechanic on the exam. The coordinator emits several subagent calls inside a single response. One response means the specialists run side by side. Spreading those calls across separate turns means they quietly queue. And there's a background mode on current builds the default, so the coordinator keeps working unless a call says it must wait. That default has moved before, so on a real job, check the build in front of you. Time to sit one, a real published sample from the guide set in a system shaped like the one you just built. A research system has a coordinator, a search agent, and a synthesis agent that writes the final report. While it writes, the synthesis agent keeps needing to check small facts, dates, names, numbers. Each time it hands control back to the coordinator, which calls the search agent, then re-invokes synthesis with the answer. That's 2 or 3 round trips per task, and it's costing about 40% extra latency. One more number from the stem. Roughly 85% of those checks are simple lookups, and the rest need real digging. Option A. Give synthesis a narrow verify fact tool for the simple lookups and keep sending the hard ones through the coordinator. Option B. Have synthesis collect every verification and send them to the coordinator as one batch at the end of its pass. Option C. Give synthesis the full set of web search tools so it never has to round trip at all. Option D. Have the search agent cache extra context around every source upfront, anticipating what synthesis will want. Name the question first. It reads like an orchestration problem because the stem complains about round trips. But every option is a proposal about which agent may touch which tool. So this is a what can it touch question. And there's no must and no never in the stem, so the elimination rule stays holstered and least privilege decides it instead. C dies first because handing the writer the full search kit is the 18 tools problem wearing a generous face. B blocks the writer's own work because a synthesis pass leans on facts it verified earlier in that same pass. D is speculation because caching ahead only pays off if you guessed right about what someone else will need later. F is the scoped cross-roll tool, the exception made on purpose, and the smallest extra access that fixes the actual complaint. The rare hard case stays on the path that already works. Look at where Nadia's reviewer stands tonight. One coordinator, three specialists, each with its own instructions and a short list of tools. Every message routes through the middle. The coordinator picks who runs, and the handover carries the findings in full. 2 lines to walk into the exam with. Subagents inherit nothing, so the prompt is the handover. And an agent gets the tools its role needs, never the tools you happen to have lying around. Next time, the specialists catch a real bug, and Marco's team merges straight past all three of them because advice, it turns out, is not a gate.